So you know you've got a book inside of you, but what publishing route are you going to pursue to get your God-given story out there to help people? I know there's no one size fits all, and it used to be only traditional or self-publishing were the routes to choose. But over the past few years, I've heard a lot about hybrid publishing. And if you heard my previous episode with my friend and author Clay Boatwright, he chose the hybrid route with Stonebrook Publishing. And I was so thrilled when Stonebrook's founder, Nancy Erickson, popped up as a possible guest when I was looking inside the Podmatch service. Nancy is also known as the book professor, and she's also the author of Stop Stalling and Start Writing, Kick the Excuses and Jumpstart Your Nonfiction Book. Oh, speaking to myself on that one, y'all. So I couldn't wait to invite her on to talk about hybrid publishing with her Stonebrook Publishing firm, and also different ways she works with authors as the book professor to help you map out your book and really know the purpose of it and who it will serve. And honestly, y'all, what she shares is such a great lesson for all of us, whether we're writing books, blogs, serving our readers on podcasts. It's all good information we need to know before we get started. And so I can't wait for you to hear from Nancy. She's also going to share her input on her experience with the Podmatch service. So I think it's so cool to hear more about how she's using it to connect with new audiences as a podcast guest and how authors can do the same. So I can't wait for you to hear from Nancy. So let's get to it. So, hey, Nancy, welcome to Book Marketing Media. I'm so glad you're here today to serve my listeners.
Thank you, Kim. I've really been looking forward to this.
Me too. So as I mentioned in my introduction that I actually found out about Nancy through a mutual friend of ours, Clay Boatwright, who y'all, if you haven't heard on the podcast yet, I'll be sure and link to his episode so you can hear all about Clay's story and how he got involved with Nancy and the amazing book that they put together. So I couldn't wait to just get into this conversation with Nancy and learn more about her because she is called the book professor and about Stonebrook Publishing, her hybrid publishing firm. So Nancy, first off, I want to ask you because, ever since I've been around on the online world, there's always been, traditional publishing. And that seems like what most people, are hoping for, to get a traditional published book deal. But we know that can't happen for everyone, right? The other option has always been self-publishing, but I know a lot of people have been hesitant on that because they don't know how to do it, or, it's just they don't want to do it all. They need somebody, to help them. And so along the way, at least in the last couple of years to me, and y'all may have been around for a lot longer than that, I just never really heard much about the hybrid publishing option. So will you tell our listeners what exactly that is?
Yeah, so it would be helpful, I think, to do a little bit of a comparison between traditional publishing and self-publishing and hybrid publishing, which kind of sits in the middle. So yeah. What you may or may not know is that the publishing industry has gone through a lot of consolidation in the last 20 years. So there's only 4 big house publishers. And of course, they have their imprints that are different. But in order to get a contract with one of those publishers, number one, you must have an agent. And the agent is going to either accept you or not. And if they do, you'll be paying them 15% of whatever you get from the publishing house. But you're not going to get an advance from the publishing house because you're unknown, right? And so some other things that they look for is an extremely large platform that you've already developed with thousands and thousands of followers, because at the end of the game, you're still going to have to market your book. And that is something that's changed. The publishers used to market your book and push it out and all kinds of stuff, but that's not happening anymore. So given the fact that they were like the gatekeepers of ideas, they got to decide what was published and what was not. We had this rise of self-publishing. And self-publishing is kind of a misnomer for a lot of people. It doesn't mean do it yourself publishing. It means that you are in charge of every aspect of the publishing process. So how would you know what to do if you haven't ever done it before? Publishing is an extremely old industry with many, many strong conventions that you need to adhere to. But if you don't know those, then you're going to end up with one of those crappy self-published books. And by that, I mean, that there was not a professional designer for the cover or a professional interior layout artist, no proofreading, no outside professional editing. And many people are taking their material and just uploading it to Amazon without having done any of these things. And your book should actually do 3 things for you. It should establish you as an expert in your field. It should increase your credibility and help you to attract a following. But if you have just thrown something up on Amazon, you haven't increased your credibility. You've probably ruined it, because your book should be the best of everything about you. That's what self-publishing has become. In the middle sits companies like mine, Stonebrook Publishing. We are a professional publishing house, and we are what we call a hybrid publisher. What that means is that we provide you all the services that one of the big 4 publishers do: professional cover design, interior layout. In our publishing house, your book goes through 3 proofreaders before it's released. And, all other things, including doing the legal work at the end to register your copyright with the Library of Congress. So one other thing I didn't mention about the, big 4 publishers is that you lose most of control over your book process when you go with them, meaning you don't get to have a choice of the cover. They may change the title of your book. They have many times up to 2 to 5 years to publish your book, and they may kill it along the way, so it may never get out. So it's long and involved and clunky. And then you probably aren't going to make money on it because you're paying your agent 15%. And it just, the author is doing all the work and they're not the ones getting the reward. So in hybrid publishing, what we do is we are your professional publishing house. We work together with you to design the cover. In fact, at Stonebrook, we give you 4 original cover designs to choose from. And it may not be perfect. You may want to combine elements from 1 or 2, but we tweak and tweak and tweak until you absolutely love it. And the same with the book title. We work with you on that. And our goal is to release your book within 90 days of starting the publishing process. But I have to tell you, you're a factor in that. If we don't get the turnaround and the answers from you, then that's going to slip out. So your book is immediate. It's yours, and it's your copyright, but we do the professional work. So up until about a couple of years ago, as your publisher, we paid you royalties on your book. We changed that in the recent years because the author has done so much of the work and has invested in it. So now you get all the proceeds from Stonebrook for your book sales. And we still, as a professional publishing house, we still go through Ingram Publisher Service that only professional publishers can access. And, your book is distributed worldwide. What we don't do is book marketing. And I will tell you why. First of all, I haven't yet talked about my other business. Well, Stonebrook we've been in business for about 14 years. In the early days, we were getting so many manuscripts from people that we couldn't publish. We couldn't do anything with it. But I still felt really responsible for that material. I mean, we concentrated on material that will either save lives, change lives, or transform society. And there was always an element of that in there, but we couldn't even edit our way out of it. So I took a step back and wrote this step by step process so that people who aren't professional writers can become authors of high impact nonfiction books. And we concentrate on nonfiction because we are in the book creation business from your idea all the way through the published worldwide distributed product. Marketing is a whole different nut to crack, as you know, right? And so we partner with a lot of book marketers depending on what the goals of the client are. And some people want to be an Amazon bestseller. I don't put any stock in that because it's kind of a game where you just reduce the price of your book and have everybody buy it. And it might be number 1 for 5 minutes. What happens the next day? Nothing.
Yeah.
But a lot of our people want to work with publicists or people who are actually marketing their book, targeting their audience. And often there's been a real trend of marketing your book, by being a podcast guest. So we figure out what it is you want to accomplish and then try to match you up with the marketer who provides that service.
Yeah, that's such great advice it is so robust, right? There's so many different things that you can do to market your book. And there's so many different things that, just may not work out for you. You want to pick the right path. And so you got to figure out what is that right path that you can keep up with. Because I know if you have that goal of just Amazon bestseller, then it's such a disappointment on day 2 when you're like, oh, wait, now I got to keep marketing this book.
That's where people like you come in.
Well, thank you. And I was so excited. I mean, I love talking about book marketing on the podcast, obviously, and especially about podcasts. So I was going to ask you this at the end, but I'm going to back up to it now because you brought it up, Nancy. But I would love to hear what your experience has been with Podmatch, the service to help podcast host and guest link up. So obviously, I know you've been a guest on many podcasts, and I imagine your authors have done the same thing. And I'd just love for you to share what your experience has been with Podmatch.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, it's been a really good experience. And I have a little methodology that I use when I'm reaching out to podcasters who I would like to be a guest on their show. So I have a discipline of doing that every day. And when I started this in February, of course, it was ground zero, nothing. And I think I've done about 45 podcasts to date. And I have about 20 more scheduled.
Yeah.
And so the important thing about marketing and getting yourself out there is you have to get outside your own circle. You have to break into somebody else's network and they can, broadcast you out there. So that's been really helpful to me. And of course, I'm talking about, helping people to write books. So I'm wanting to reach people who are wanting to write a nonfiction book. And so I've gotten, I think to date, about maybe 5 new clients for this, which I think is really good. Because podcasts, the other wonderful, they live forever. You never know when somebody's going to listen to it. And so, I always try to include information about how to get in touch with me. And people have. I mean, it's been remarkable. It's like I have a link on my website at thebookprofessor.com that says schedule a call with Nancy. And things pop up on my calendar. I've never met that person before. So I think podcasting is so brilliant. It's a little bite-sized, consumable, easily consumable bit of information that's targeted to what you're interested in. So I have directed a lot of our authors to trying that approach.
Yeah, I love Alex, the founder. I think it's just amazing what he's put together. And I wish more people would, take advantage of it.
I love Podmatch. It makes it so easy. So I'm a big fan. It was a great discovery.
And I'm so glad you talked about, it is all about meeting new people that you may not meet otherwise and getting to serve audiences that you may have, no connection to whatsoever. And I know lots of people, including myself, always think, oh, I might want to write a book one day. So I think that's so cool that there's this way to reach out to people that you would not know otherwise. Right. And I talk to my listeners a lot about that, Nancy, because we have, most of my listeners are Christian nonfiction writers and authors. And that's kind of the publishing path they've chose, is they're going to write a book that falls under that, genre or category.
I love that. I'm a believer myself, so I like it.
But, within those listeners, there's still a lot of people that are life coaches, business coaches, a lot of mental health providers that I serve, and like leadership coaches. And so they may be writing a faith-based book, but there's also a piece of them that it may intersect with that, but it may be aside from that, where they could be, using a book to get speaking engagements, and they could just serve this much wider audience. So I'd love for you to talk about how you've done that with authors, how they have wrote a book maybe for that purpose, and just any input you have on, just how to go about that, how they can, I guess we didn't even talk about that, how they can work with you through that. So that if you just want to talk about both of those, that'd be awesome.
So the process, we always start, first of all, I work with clients in 2 ways. I have a one-to-one coaching option available, but most people want to work in our book masterminds, where there's a cohort of, it's usually 3 to 6 people. It's small, where you're going through the entire process together and you're actually supporting each other, contributing to each other's content. And it's a true mastermind where you're vetting your ideas, et cetera. And so the way it works is we always start off with you answering a series of foundational questions about your book. And it's things like, why are you even doing this? What's your motivation? Who specifically is your audience? And how is that audience going to be changed as a result of taking in your material? And so once we have the answers to all those questions, we distill them down into a purpose statement for your book. And the purpose statement is simple. It just says, the purpose of this book is to do this particular thing for this specific audience, because you can't put everything in a book. And know that it helps you to prioritize. So whenever you're thinking about what you want to put in your book, you just measure it against that purpose statement. If it helps the audience reach the purpose, it's in. If not, set it aside. You may have other books in you and all, but let's keep things really targeted and focused in your book. So after that, then we go through a process that I developed called book mapping. And there's two types of book maps. One is your own personal story, where you share with your readers how you came to be where you are right now, giving them your brilliant information, advice, suggestions, etc. That usually ends up becoming the introduction for your book, where you're setting yourself up as this expert. But then when we move to the chapter content for your book, we develop those chapters in problem solution sets. And it's a very step-by-step process. Like one week I say, okay, name the problems that your clientele has, and then just name the solutions. And then we start building on that. And we build your chapters out. And it ends up being, you end up having like a mind map for each chapter. And it includes everything you're going to talk about, notes about everything. You're not writing it, you're making notes, so that when you sit down to write, there is no such thing as writer's block. You're just simply executing on your plan. So it's definitely a shortcut and keeps you focused. So I teach you a formula for how to tell stories that really works brilliantly. And so in each of your chapters, you're talking about the problems and the solutions and why the solution works. And then through a very story-driven methodology, you present these solutions. Because as authors, our job really is not only to educate and inform, but we have to entertain too, to keep people reading, or they won't, come to the end of the book and realize the purpose. So once we map all those out, and like I said, you'll have a different map for each chapter. Then we move into the phase where you're writing your first draft. And Kim, that's where I put on my professor hat. I've taught at the university in St. Louis for a long time. I'm not doing it anymore because I don't have time, but I teach you how to write really compelling, creative nonfiction. And it's fun. I mean, a lot of people haven't written anything since they were in school, other than emails and that type of thing. But you're going to surprise yourself. It's going to pull things out of you, and you'll really surprise yourself. So at the end of that second module, it's kind of a dump of everything that's on your book map. But in that third module, which is called Polish and Perfect, I take you through a series of editing exercises to perform on your own material, so that when you're finished, and this is like where all the magic happens, when you're finished, you have a finished book manuscript. So it won't be ready for publishing yet, because we have a step between writing the manuscript and publishing it, which is the professional edit. So that's how I work with clients. Some success stories, some things I'm really proud of. A lot of our authors. Clay Boatwright is one of them. His is really rising in sales, and certainly a lot of interest, particularly with people who have children with autism. Another one I want to point out too, and by the way, a lot of our books win major awards. That's how good they are. And these are first-time authors, So I want to point out one right here. It's called What Lurks in the Woods. And I know your listeners can't do this, but if you're viewing us, you can. This is written by Nicole Bell, and she is she's educated at MIT. She's an incredible brainiac. She and her husband were involved in some, I don't even know what they did. It was so out of my league, but he was equally as brilliant as she. And she started noticing signs of him not functioning well and memory loss. And so as they pursued things, he was diagnosed with early Alzheimer's, which did not make sense to Nicole because he was too young. There was no family history, et cetera. And so being a researcher and such, she was digging into it as he was declining. The sad news is she ended up figuring out what was wrong with him. And it was Lyme disease that had caused his dementia.
Wow.
And if he had had an early intervention with a simple medication, he would have been fine. But he ended up in a nursing home and he passed away about a year ago. So now she has redirected her life work, and they've got little kids, you know, she's redirected her life work. She's been on the Today Show, USA Today, talking about advocacy for not advocating Lyme disease, but for people being, figuring out Lyme disease and other tick-borne illnesses. And now she's developed a testing protocol and has started a medical device company that will assist in early detection of Lyme disease.
That's incredible.
Yeah. You know what? She didn't know she was going to do any of these things when she started the book. But because she had a book and it has won an award, it gave her so much credibility walking into things. And she pursued this as her, kind of the rest of her life passion. So I'm really proud of what Nicole has done.
Yeah. You just never know what words, when you put them down on paper and somebody else gets to read them, you just, like you said, you're into life-changing books. You just never know what lives are going to be changed. And then for you, the author, what doors might be open for you to, to help keep spreading the word. And that's what I think about with our audience. I think there's, a faith-based component to the book, and they may even be out speaking on their faith-based topics, but yet they may have this incredible, experience or knowledge in another area that they could be also serving the audience through. So I think, a book would be amazing to do that.
I want to speak a little bit to the faith-based thing. You don't have to wear that on your sleeve and declare it because you are a follower of Jesus Christ. Your book will be faith-based, but that doesn't mean you have to brand it as a Christian book, because what you know from the Word of God and from your studies and relationship with the Holy Spirit, what works. Works, right? But you don't have to necessarily say it in Christian terminology in order to help other people. So, like I said, we are interested in working with material that will change lives, save lives, and transform society. And many of our authors through this process have been able to get speaking engagements. Oh, and the other thing I forgot to tell you is at the end, because we constructed your book in these problem solution sets, at the end, your book can become the launch pad through which you broadcast your message across multiple venues, because you should be able to take every chapter of that book, every chapter solves a problem, and repurpose that material for keynotes or seminars or workshops or video training or online classes or podcasts. So the book is the origin of all that, but it's not really about the book. It's about getting your message out of you and out to the world where it can do.
Yeah, that's so good. And I was thinking about that when you were kind of mapping out that your map, your process. I was thinking the whole time, like, this is genius for anybody that has content. Like if you're planning out your podcast, I mean, just to go through those steps, it would just really solidify who you're serving and how.
And I want to, because you have a Christian audience, I want to tell you how I came about this. I don't know. I will tell you that we were having issues with getting really bad manuscripts in the publishing house. And so I heard the voice of God that said, stop publishing, start teaching, because I am a teacher at heart, right? And this material came through me. I mean, it came through me. I mean, I'm not saying I didn't spend a year, putting it together and all, but it came through me, and it has worked every time for every type of nonfiction book. And that can only be from God.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that so much. And so you were talking about Nancy. So Nancy, the book professor, and then we have Stonebrook Publishing. So how do those differ? Can somebody work with you as a book professor, but maybe they don't do the publishing, or how does that work?
Yeah. They're independent companies. And the only way they're linked is that through our clients who want us to publish their book once they're finished writing. So we have many other authors that we publish in Stonebrook that didn't go through our channel. They have to go through an approval process before we work with them. We know that the people we work with that will publish because we help them to develop the material. So, and other authors, I wasn't trying to slam self-publishing, but if you want to self-publish your book after we're through, with the writing part of it, it's yours. You can take it and do what you want. Most of our clients stick with us because it's too hard to figure out what to do. And when they start asking me questions like, well, who should design my cover and stuff, I say, we should, that's why I won't help you self-publish, but there's probably others out there who can.
Yeah.
But, you're in a safe place with us and we know you'll be happy with the results.
Yeah. Like I said, I was so pleased with when I spotted Clay's book. And I mean, it's just so professionally done. And I was telling him, like, I just imagine like if he's at a speaking event and there's a book table, maybe it has more books than just his. I mean, it would definitely stand out in my mind, and that's what I noticed, like with self-publishing. I know I have a lot of friends that have done that successfully, but they, probably have all the skills and they also know a lot about like covers and graphic design, or they have people helping them with it. So they're not really doing it all by themselves, but you can definitely tell the books that they've done it all by themselves and they didn't know. They were just like, let me just hurry up and get this out the door. And it's like, oh my gosh, like when you see a cover, you're just like, oh wait, if you just would change that cover, this book would do so much better. So again, I can't say enough about Clay.
Like with Clay and stuff, we also share all those graphics with our authors so that they can use them in their promotional materials, et cetera. We want you to be successful. We want you to use this as your branding if you want to. And so all the design elements we offer to you, to use in other things.
That's awesome. Yeah, because you could use it for so much stuff. Well, I know I shared a short little video on Instagram the day I talked to Clay and showed his book cover. And so many people commented and sent me DMs on it because they were just like, I love that title. Like that's, I mean, and it could apply to all of us. I know, God's playing our circus, but so I'm so excited to champion Clay's book. So let me ask you, Nancy, because you've been around the block for a while working with lots of authors. I know you've also authored your own book. What would you have to share with authors or even just writers that might be listening that haven't even made that attempt to start a book, but, they just have fears of, writing their story and putting it out there and just, going through the whole process. Like there's just so much fear built up into it. What would you have to say to them?
Yeah, it is vulnerable, but, sometimes people will tell me their story and they're like, who am I to write a book? And I just think, I'll even say to them, who are you to keep this to yourself? You have something inside, you can let your light shine. And if you're working with us, we are hand-holding you the whole way through. And you've got this cohort of other writers in the same position who are affirming what you're doing or questioning it, which also is helpful. And, probably the hardest part of writing your book is making the decision to do so. But we have worked with so many authors who had people who had really rough material that was painful to write, people who are doing business books. We kind of have a class of writers that I call overcomers who have been through things and overcome them and are now in a stronger position. I think our responsibility while we're here is to offer other people two things, and those two things are hope and help. And you can do that through writing a nonfiction book. And I'd love to work with you. I'd love to even just chat with you about your book ideas. So I mentioned earlier at my website, thebookprofessor.com, there's a link across the top that says schedule a call with Nancy, and we'll just pop on Zoom and talk about your ideas. No obligation.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's so awesome. Well, that's what I was going to ask you next. Just how can our listeners, get connected with you so they can go to bookprofessor.com.
It's
thebookprofessor.com. Okay. And I'll be sure and put links to that in the show notes, as well as stonebrookpublishing.net is the publishing side of it.
That's correct.
Okay, good. Yeah. Well, great. Oh gosh, Nancy, this has been so good today just to learn all about hybrid publishing and just, the services you offer, because I know there's so many people that have a book inside of them, but they just maybe don't know where to start, or they get stuck in the process somewhere and they do need that hand holding from somebody that's been there.
Accountability. We just move through it step by step.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Oh gosh. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I'm so thankful for you to be here to serve my listeners.
Thank you, Kim.
Oh, goodness, y'all. Are your wheels spinning at the idea of having someone come beside you to walk you through publishing your book? If so, be sure to reach out to Nancy, and I'll put all of her links here in the show notes. I pray today's conversation was a blessing to you. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, I'll be there for you next time to help you market your book one podcast at a time. See you then.